When we moved into the old house on Belleville Street, I wasn't thrilled. It was massive, creaky, and the kind of place you'd expect to see in a horror movie. Mom loved it, though, saying it had character, whatever that meant. While unpacking, I noticed an odd section of wall in the hallway near my room. The wallpaper didn't match the rest, and when I knocked on it, it sounded hollow. Dad said it was probably just a part of the old structure, covered over by previous owners. But something didn't feel right. Later that night, I couldn't sleep, thinking about the wall. I got out of bed, flashlight in hand, and went to investigate. As I pressed against the odd section, a narrow door swung open, creaking on rusty hinges. It was barely wide enough to slip through, and the darkness inside seemed endless. My heart pounded, but curiosity pulled me forward. I stepped inside. The smell of dampness and something else, something sickly sweet and metallic, filled the air. I stumbled forward, my flashlight flickering, illuminating walls covered in faded, smeared red marks. I felt like I had found a room no one was meant to see. The hidden room was small and cramped, filled with objects that looked decades old. Rusted chains hung from the ceiling, and the floor was stained dark red, as if someone had spilled gallons of paint. As I moved further in, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. There were photographs pinned to the walls, pictures of people with hollow, vacant expressions. Some were so faded you could barely make out their faces, but others were disturbingly clear. Then I saw it, a small metal table in the corner, with restraints attached. Something about it was unsettlingly familiar, like I had seen it before in some nightmare. And the smell, it was stronger here, cloying, filling my lungs until I felt like I couldn't breathe. Before I could leave, I noticed something on the floor, glinting in the light. I bent down to pick it up, finding an old, tarnished locket. I opened it, and there inside was a photo of a young girl who looked just like my mother. I took the locket to Mom, who paled the moment she saw it. She stammered, saying she didn't know what it was, that she had never seen it before. But the way her eyes darted to the hallway, I could tell she was lying. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room, the chains, the stains, the photos on the wall. I needed answers. I crept back to the hidden door, slipping inside the room again. This time, I noticed something different, a journal lying on the metal table. The cover was peeling, and it looked like it hadn't been touched in years. I opened it, flipping through pages filled with shaky handwriting, descriptions of someone's work, details about subjects and tests. The entries grew more chaotic, describing screams, struggles, and finally, silence. I realized then that whoever had written this hadn't just been living in the house, they had been using it. Using that room. And Mom. She must have known about it all along. The next day, I confronted Mom, demanding to know the truth. She broke down, telling me about her father, a man who had been disturbed. She said he used to experiment on people he brought home, convinced he could cure them of imaginary ailments. She said she thought the room had been boarded up, that no one would ever find it again. But the look in her eyes told me she wasn't being entirely honest. That night, I heard noises, footsteps echoing down the hallway, a faint dragging sound, like something heavy being moved. I got out of bed, my hands shaking, and crept to the hallway. The door to the hidden room was open, swinging slightly. I shone my flashlight inside, but the room was empty. The photographs, the chains, even the stains, all gone. Then I felt a breath on my neck, and a voice whispered, "You shouldn't have come here." I turned, but there was no one there. Just the darkness. After that night, things got worse. I started seeing shadows at the corner of my vision, feeling cold hands brush against me in the middle of the night. Objects moved on their own, and I began to hear voices whispering, telling me to go back to the room. One night, unable to take it anymore, I returned. The room looked just as it had the first time I saw it. This time, though, the chains were swaying slightly, as if recently touched. Then I saw something horrific, a figure in the corner, half shrouded in darkness, with pale skin and empty eyes. Its face was twisted, and it wore the locket around its neck. It reached out to me, and I felt an icy grip on my wrist, pulling me closer. I screamed, trying to pull away, but the figure held tight, whispering in a voice that sounded almost like my own, "You can't leave. Not now." I broke free, stumbling back into the hallway, slamming the door shut. But as I leaned against it, I heard something scratching from the other side. I decided to leave the house that night. I didn't care what Mom said, I couldn't stay another moment. As I packed my things, I heard the whispers growing louder, filling the house with voices that sounded both familiar and alien. I ran to the front door, but it wouldn't open. No matter how hard I pulled, it stayed shut, trapping me inside. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with the smell of decay and rot. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see the figure from the room, slowly advancing, dragging something heavy behind it, a rusted chain. Its eyes were hollow, empty, staring right through me. In a final act of desperation, I ran back to the hidden room, hoping to lose it there. But when I entered, I found it waiting for me, standing in the center of the room, smiling. The door slammed shut behind me, and the last thing I remember is the cold, metallic taste of blood filling the air as the figure reached for me, whispering, "Welcome home." The police found the house empty days later. My family had vanished without a trace, and the room, sealed behind a wall as if it had never existed. No one believed the stories about the hidden room, about the horrors I had uncovered. But the whispers, the shadows, they're still here, lingering in the walls, waiting for someone else to find the door. Now, as I write this, I realize that I've become part of the house, another shadow, another whisper in the dark, waiting for the next visitor.